Welcome to MTMG's IT Roundtable, where we bring the power of human connections to the tech world. Our experts become part of your team, so whatever tech problem is keeping you up at night, we can help you solve it.
Joining us today are two very important members of the team, new to the team as well, Bob McNeil and Tom Brown. They have been in the industry for years, but I'll let them talk about their backgrounds in a minute. But we're thrilled to have them on board. They've really helped fill out our cybersecurity realm. And to that end, let me just pass it over to you guys. Tom, let's start with you. Can you give us a little bit about your background and how we got started working together?
Yeah, well, I've been in the professional field for a while, but the last 10 years or so, I've been in the cybersecurity space, especially in the email security and archiving, as well as mobile device and app security. And we crossed paths because I was working on some things in the mobile space, and Paul and I had some mutual friends, and we ended up talking a little bit, and here we are.
Sounds great. And also Bob McNeil.
Good morning, team. Yes, Bob McNeil. And my background, I'm a technology sales professional. I got my start in sales as the son of a Ford dealer in Massachusetts, and very quickly got away from that business as fast as I could. But the technology sector has been fantastic. Over my career, I've sold enterprise systems, hardware, software, professional services, most recently with managed services. And regardless of whatever I've touched, the cybersecurity has been wrapped around those solutions end to end. So this is going to be a very exciting talk because there's things that, so many aspects that we can go over, but no matter what you're touching in the IT field, cybersecurity has to have a wrapper around it end to end.
Awesome. Well, let's dig right in. So we've got some of the more common things that we hear about in today's world, ransomware and phishing, and those threats are facing small and mid-sized businesses today. What are some of the most effective strategies that you see for defending against these attacks? How can SMBs train their employees to spot these threats early?
Well, I can start there. One is vigilance and being proactive. Everyone's been hacked, whether you know it or not. Someone's snooping around in your stuff, and your awareness, your proactive awareness of this is critical. Recently, some of the most, we have diverse causes of IT issues. Two of the most recent, most notable in the press came from completely different ends of the IT threat spectrum. There was an MGM hack that cost the gaming industry in Nevada tons of money, and that was pure spear phishing. That was a human fault. And then at the other end of the spectrum was the CrowdStrike debacle, which was purely technical. But there were no sysadmins that were at fault at all, but half of the world system went down for many, many hours and caused a huge amount of disruption. But to be proactive about this stuff, you have to, have a culture of caution. You have to have have something that can help. There are services out there that provide proactive training and proactive white hat spear phishing within your organization to see who's up to snuff, who is actually able to spot this stuff and flag it as a potential spear phishing attack. And oh boy, it's out there. Especially if your company has intellectual property, if you are in a number of key verticals, you better be on top of this, because otherwise they're going to be on top of you.
Bob, if you don't mind me adding to that, you hit the nail on the head. The human element is one of the biggest things here, and making sure that you have some training in place, but also having policies in place, right? Because a lot of these scenarios is someone might reach out to someone with a text or an email or something like that says, hey, do this. Look for the verbiage in there, and also make sure that there's always confirmation. If someone says, hey, I need you to do something urgently, can you go buy these gift cards and go do this? Make sure that there is a process in place at the company that says, hey, pick up the phone and call that person and confirm that they are asking for that. Doesn't matter if they say, hey, I'm in a hurry right now, let me do this. If they answer the phone, they're going to tell you, hey, I didn't ask you to do that, right? So the human element is definitely the biggest thing here, and making sure that there's policies in place so that there's checks and balances so someone doesn't just go buy gift cards or go transfer for money. And the biggest thing and another big thing to think about is a lot of companies are concerned that it's the executives, it's the C-level executives and the vice presidents. But you mentioned a couple of attacks that happened, and it's a big thing. You hear people like Target was attacked a few years ago, and it was a vendor that was the one who actually was able to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from them. It was an HVAC vendor, right? So you got to be careful of these kind of things. It's usually someone you don't expect, right? Some companies say, hey, I just need to protect my top 50 executives. 90% of the time, it comes from somebody else. It comes from a janitor, it comes from a secretary, it comes from a salesperson, right? So just be careful that it's not just your high-level executives, and that it is the human element that needs to have the checks and balances in place to make sure that something like this doesn't happen. So training, and communication.
I think you both hit the nails on the head. It really is very critical that as long as someone has access, they're a target. So it can be that janitor, it can be that assistant, it can be that wherever, because they have credentials that will allow the attacker to get inside your organization. They may not have access to everything, but once they're inside, it's a lot easier for them to get around. And it doesn't matter how small you are. Our firm has only been around since March, and we are not huge, and people have been attempting to get ours. So it is absolutely out there, and it's really very strongly recommended that you stay vigilant. So really great answers, guys. It does lead me to one of the things that a lot of small businesses are doing now is moving to the cloud. What are the unique security challenges they may face, and are there best practices they should follow to ensure they're secure and compliant?
Yeah, I can start with that. There's a concept, and it's a military concept called your attack surface. So back in the day when everybody had their apps stuck in their data closet on-prem, you had very limited opportunities, so very few points of entry to get access to that intellectual property, to that data. Nowadays, you have your CFO might have stood up an application on Amazon. Your chief human resources officer has a SaaS application to help them run, and they're bypassing them, and 5 other department heads are bypassing your internal IT department because it's that easy these days. What that creates is an attack surface that's much, much greater. And the IT department and your cybersecurity team, if you have an internal team, they might not even be aware of where all this stuff is, because it can be spun up that easy, and they can offload a company database into Azure, into GCP, into Oracle, into any number of different vendors, countless vendors, and being aware of where that is and being able to secure all of those different cloud instances, in addition to what's on-prem, on-site, hybrid, what have you, is critical. But that's the newer challenge that's come up in the past few years, because it is so easy now.
And if you guys don't mind, I have a couple of quick things to add. Some things to think about with that, like you nailed it. But I think the thing you need to look at is identity access management, right? If you now have all these cloud associations, you need to make sure that, hey, I gave Tom access to this cloud instance and that cloud instance. If you have a tool that can actually go out and say, hey, Tom hasn't accessed this tool in 30 days. Let's go change his password so that it's not just open out and about anymore. And having some tools out there that can look at that kind of stuff, so you don't accidentally have an admin password that's floating around out there that no one's used in a while, but is easy to figure out and someone can get in. But another thing to think about is AI, right? So if people nowadays are starting to reduce some of their workforce because, hey, maybe I can use AI to do this. By leveraging AI, you're actually using more and more data. Like if you ask AI to answer a question for you, it's not going to be the 3 or 4 word question that you answer, right? It's going to be a couple of paragraphs. So if every time you use AI, you're adding more and more data, your cloud resources are getting more and more data in them. So that's something to think about too, is your expenses could go up, right? If you're paying X amount of dollars for Azure because you have so much space, but you keep adding all this data every day by using AI for all these things, and you don't have anybody to clean up that AI, that data just keeps expanding and expanding. So something to think about.
So we talk about all these tools for SMBs, and costs are obviously a major concern for SMBs. What are some of the cost-effective solutions or strategies that SMBs can implement to protect themselves without spending a fortune?
What I can say is it's going to come back to governance, internal governance. Most companies aren't even aware of all the subscriptions that they have. And going through the process of, you could call it software hygiene, going through an analytic, with a deep analysis, evaluate your software spend on each employee and be aware of that. Pulling that information together is a challenge, but it can pay huge dividends. 10, 100x, whatever effort you put into it will come back to you. And there are governance tools out there that can assist with this, help automate that process.
Another quick 2 cents budget. Something to think about there is everyone is now looking and saying, hey, how can I cut my budget? Oh, I'm spending X amount of dollars with Microsoft because I have E5 licensing. You need to assess that and go, okay, maybe I have E5 licensing. I have access to all these tools. Go look at that. Maybe you're paying for another tool you're not using. But then on the flip side of that is, hey, it's giving you access to 10 tools. Maybe I'm only using 3. Maybe I can downgrade to E3 licensing. So those are things you need to be aware of and kind of always be checking, at least every 6 months or even every 3 months, just going, hey, what am I using? What am I not using? Maybe there's a tool over here that's maybe I'm using Microsoft, but maybe there's a tool over here that's better, that's less expensive. I can downgrade to E3 licensing, but go add on this other very small license for something else. So something to think about.
And something that catches a lot of CFOs is the hyperscalers are, their IT leadership could be kids at a candy store. And what started off with, a $5,000 MRR, monthly recurring revenue spend with AWS or Azure or GCP, quickly balloons to $50K MRR for that cloud spend. Again, having governance on where that comes from, and having, if it comes back to policy, have some kind of approval process, because it creeps up on you and surprises a lot of financial leaders out there.
I so thoroughly agree with you. And one of the things that we've seen some of our other customers is that need for SaaS remediation, that they have all these subscriptions that they can't even control. So that's a whole podcast for another day. So I'm going to leave that there. But for now, I thoroughly agree. But that does bring up a point that small to medium enterprise often rely on third-party vendors and partners. How can they effectively manage those risks and ensure that their vendors are not the weakest link in their cybersecurity strategy?
I can start off again. Yes, it's going to be demanding. You have to, one, vet them very carefully. I've gone through this process as a vendor. I've had to go through processes where, one, do we have the policies in place? And are we financially sound? When you're a startup company, a vendor, as I've been from time to time in my career, you're a vendor, you have to show that you are here today and here tomorrow for them, and demonstrate, provide those policies and show those audits, demand those things from your vendors. And and don't let up. I think, Tom mentioned the 90 days. I think it's a great checkpoint. Just don't, because things evolve that quickly and change that quickly, and new threats are constantly emerging. Tom?
Agreed. Yeah, it's you definitely have to make sure that you're paying attention to all that, and making sure that not only are you concerned about your risks, but whatever third parties you're dealing with, right? They have risks, so you need to find out what they are and if they're things that you're willing to work with.
Yeah. In fact, and do the work. It's not glamorous. I remember about the last pure startup I was at, I remember adapting GDPR regulatory compliance, working on that with my company's internal IT director. And so I could close it was a DR as a service in both the US and in the EU and the UK. Those are separate now, by the way.
Right.
So it's a challenge, but you got to do the work. Not fun.
Exactly. And one of the reasons that the MTMG exists, right, is to help companies, but not just with their, apps or, end user devices or anything. It's really about helping them with their partners, right? So if they've got third parties out there, we can very much act like an escalation point to help them with their vendors, third parties, whoever they're using, and certainly with security, we want to make sure that they live up to their commitments. So that's one of the things that we can do. And I'm glad that we're talking about third parties here. So that's excellent. One of the areas too, I think that SMBs may have a little difficulty with is regulatory compliance, data protection. They don't have a lot of resources. They don't want to overwhelm their resources. So there are a lot of regulations out there, GDPR, CCPA. So what steps should SMBs take to stay compliant and protect their data? How can they prepare for audits and certification processes?
I'd say this field is very specialized, and you can throw tools at things, but you have to have smart people managing these tools. This talent is extremely hard to find in the marketplace. So if you're a company if you're outside of the Fortune 500, Global 2000, having this in-house is going to be extremely difficult because the talent that's out there is very rare, and it's going to be very hard to find these people, keep these people in a small environment. But you can have a fractional service to take care of these things on a 24/7 basis. Something I've been working on a lot in the last couple of years was SOC as a service, Security Operations Center as a service. You have to have this room that looks like a mission control at NASA, constantly monitoring your systems, being alerted to things and responding to things on a 24/7, 365 basis. And to do that as a small, in the small, medium business size, it's near impossible costs. You have to have at least, 15, 20 people to staff one of these things on your own. You're not going to find them on your own. But a managed service provider or managed security services provider can do that because they can share those resources across dozens or hundreds or even thousands of end users.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I kind of wanted to add a little bit to that based on my experience is when it comes to some of these compliance, it's really easy to get a tool, and MTMG has some resources to help companies with this, is to look at your apps, right? Apps are important, not only for you and your employees, but you may have an app that your customers use. And there are tools out there that can constantly, I'll throw out a term, SAST and DAST, basically static and dynamically look at those apps and see, are those apps violating any GDPR rules? Is there PII inside one of these apps that's doing something that it shouldn't? And that can be to help your employees, but also to help your customers to make sure that you're not violating anything for your customers and making sure your customers, say you're a bank, right? You want to make sure that your customers, when using the app to do transactions, it's not violating any rules and is also keeping the customer happy and making sure their privacy is intact and not having any issues there. And there's lots of tools to leverage with that. And MTMG has some great suggestions to be able to help you guys help customers in the SMB space as well as the commercial space with that. And it's not just your apps that's out in the wild, but again, the apps that might be running on my phone. So when I go to access my corporate email, I want to make sure that I don't have some app that's sending data off to a server in China that the company may not be comfortable with. And the company has the ability to dynamically look at that and in real time as those things are happening, go, hey, let's shut this down. Let's lock this out so Tom can't go pull down his email. I may just be a standard employee, but I'm just a salesperson or whatever. But if I'm actually pulling email down, that email has sensitive data. No matter who you think you are, how important or unimportant you think you are, there's data in that email that shouldn't be out there for other people to see. So if I have an app on my phone that's doing something it shouldn't be, I probably shouldn't have access to that email at that time. So you have the ability to kind of say, hey, let's stop that. Let's tell the user they need to fix this problem and then move on.
Excellent. And, I think one of the things that we talk about in security is mobile threat defense, right? Sometimes it gets, left out. Sometimes it's like the second part of the conversation, but it's one of the primary ways that people access the network. And so they're a common target for cyber criminals. And what are the biggest mobile security threats facing SMBs today? How can they, use mobile threat defense solutions like Karata or help in mitigating these risks? I mean, what should SMBs look for when choosing a mobile threat defense solution?
Yeah, so I'll kind of add some color to that. I think the scenario is, and people don't always think of this, is every time I look at the stat, it goes up, right? So how many people all of us on this call can attest to, like, when I go to look at my email, I would say there's at least an 80% chance I look at an email on my phone before I look at it on a laptop, right? So I'm on my device all the time, and devices, every time I look at the stat, it goes up. I think the last time I looked, it was somewhere in the mid 60s. 60% of attacks are targeted towards mobile devices. And even if you have email security, right? Not everybody has things that can protect against a smishing attack, a SMS text attack, right? So looking for a tool that can run, Karada, for example, is a great example of this, a tool that can run on a device that can look to see suspicious things happening on the device in real time. And because it can be on device, as an end user, I might be concerned, hey, I'm going to go work for the company. The company is going to let me access their email. They're going to let me access Slack and all these other tools, Teams, whatever it is. The company has to think, hey, I want to make sure that Tom's device is clean and there's no issues. He didn't walk into a fake Starbucks network, or his device isn't jailbroken or running some third-party malicious app on it. But on the other end of the spectrum, the employee is kind of saying, hey, I want to make sure that you can't access my pictures and you can't see all the things I'm doing. So having an on-device tool that never sends data that's personal outside of the device can make the customer happy, or the end user, the employee happy, because they know, hey, no one's violating my personal space, but I'm also protected. And the employer can say, hey, I'm happy too, because I don't want to see that data, right? I don't even want to see that data, but I want to make sure that that user is protected, and also make sure that that user is not causing issues for the business, right? So everybody wins if you have a tool that can run on device and can look for things like, hey, Tom just downloaded an app that just reached out to Russia or some other, North Korea, some other unsanctioned country with data from my phone that just sent it out there. Like, let's stop that, right? So it not only protects the user from things that could happen, but it also can protect the company. So if you do these things right, you're stepping in the right direction. And the thing to think about here is, a lot of people are going to say, oh, I have mobile device management. But the problem with that is it's literally a management tool. And if you ever look at the MITRE ATT&CK framework for mobile, it only hits about 70% of that, right? So if I want to make sure that I'm actually protected, I need to go above and beyond and use a mobile threat defense tool, because it can do more than just management, right? It's like, I think of mobile device management like the fire department or the police department, right? If I know there's an issue at the house, I send the fire department, the police department, they show up at the house, but they don't know what's going on yet. So if I have mobile threat defense, it's kind of like having a smoke detector or an alarm system in the house. And it says, hey, there's a fire in the upstairs bedroom, or someone just broke through this window. So now it's giving you more protection and more visibility into what's going on. So MDM alone is not enough. You need to have some threat defense on those devices. Back in the day, no one ever people nowadays would never give someone a laptop as a company and say, hey, don't worry about it. We're not putting any antivirus on there. We're just going to have a management tool running on it. But people do it all the time now with mobile, and mobile's being attacked more than other devices. So I could probably talk on this for an hour, but that's probably a good start. So making sure that you have threat defense protection on a device is very important, I think. And right now, there's a very small, less than 10% of mobile devices that are accessing corporate data have some type of threat defense on them. So it's a very important tool that needs to be addressed in the future. So hopefully that's helpful.
It is. In fact, I was commenting on that. The home security analogies for this are great. And I'm from a car dealer family, so the car analogies don't work too well when it comes to cybersecurity, but the home alarm systems work great as a great way to wrap your head around these different, the threat attack surfaces like mobile devices. So it's another extension like cloud computing, another extension of your attack surface, where people can get in and do things you don't want them to do.
Yep, exactly.
I think, Tom, you kind of hit on this, but I just want to make it a little clear. The role of work has changed since the pandemic. It has sped up the ability for companies to allow remote workers to a far greater extent than they ever had before. What can an SMB do to make sure their devices are fully secure in this new environment?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's having that threat defense on there, right? So users nowadays are on their mobile devices, they're working from home. You never know. They could be traveling too, right? So making sure that the device and these are things that you can leverage with Microsoft, right? It's really easy. Let's say you're using Microsoft email. There is conditional access that can say, hey, I'm going to tie this into a tool like Karada, for example, and say, hey, Tom can access his email, but if I see any of these threats and you can actually control what that is, you could say, hey, if their device is jailbroken or the device is in a fake hotel network, I can actually stop his access and block his access and just pop up a notification saying, hey, here's an issue that you're dealing with. Please go off this network and then you can access your email again, or please uninstall this app and then you can access your email again. So it's giving the user, it's not stopping the user from being able to use their mobile device, but being more protective as a company to say, hey, you can access email, but there are some stipulations to that, right? So, it's like going to work, you can go to work, but there's certain things you have to do. You have to park here. You got to go, I'm letting you access the email, but there's a stipulation on there. Your device can't be in what we call a dirty state, right? It can't be on a bad network. It can't be, having a malicious app on it. You can even set controls in certain software to say, hey, if Tom happens to be traveling in a certain location, his device can only communicate with servers in North America, for example. Creating rules like that. And that makes it really easy because instead of just disabling things and bricking somebody's phone, you could say, hey, your phone, you can still do everything that you want to do, but the reality is we don't want you to access email because we're not comfortable of the state that your phone is in right now. And here's how you fix that. And you can notify some of those notifications. You can sometimes customize those notifications to tell the user specifically what they need to do. And this is a great way to kind of go full circle and help protect that human element, right? You're letting them know, hey, they might not have any idea they just walked into a fake coffee shop network or installed a third-party Ticketmaster app that they thought was Ticketmaster, right? It gives them the ability to kind of question those things. And we can say, hey, we know definitively this is a problem. Here's how you fix that. So I think that's helpful for the customers and actually protecting your human element. You're giving them some tools and giving them some power to understand what's going on and not just like shutting things off without telling anybody anything, but giving them some control to understand that. But as a company, you're saying, hey, I'm allowing you to access certain things, but there are stipulations and here's how we can help you. So I hope that's helpful.
Very much so. Bob, did you want to add anything?
Beyond the actual tools, you can encourage a culture of, if you see something, say something. That's one of the soft skills that I'm always talking to my clients about. One, yeah, you can throw tools at things, but if people are, you can throw the finest cybersecurity tools in front of arm people with these things, but if they don't use them, it's not going to do anything for you. Encourage a culture of you're not annoying your IT team. That could be your managed service provider too. If you see something, say something, because there's new threats emerging every day.
I think you summed it up beautifully there, Bob. We've talked a lot about the different tools. We've talked about a lot of different things companies need to be aware of, but it really all boils down to the human interaction and what they're willing to do with it. So I think that's perfectly said. But before we move on to the more than mere genius questions, is there anything else you guys wanted to touch on that we may have missed?
I just want to hit a little bit on the recent attacks, right? So everybody's talking about it, but I just want to be clear that, this kind of stuff happens to everybody, right? So everybody has had an issue, right? Some bigger than others, right? But the most recent attack, as Bob mentioned earlier, it took down, what was it? Many millions, almost just below 10 million. I want to say it was like 8.5 million devices. And it always makes you reassess things. And I think that this is a great time for companies to kind of reassess all of the stuff we're talking about. How are you leveraging anything? What is your disaster recovery plan? Do you have backup plans for backup plans? And what happened here, again, I said this could happen to anybody, but the reality was they did a live update to something in the kernel of the device. So, you need to kind of think of some of these things as, okay, maybe there needs to be more testing in place. And a lot of times other companies do when they do something that's in the kernel, they give you a pre-release so you can test it in your environment to make sure it doesn't do these kind of things. So it just, I think more than anything, it just made people more aware. I think right now, a lot of companies are kind of cutting back spending and trying to, outsource their SOC teams and things like that. And I think it's giving these companies the ability to kind of reassess what's going on in the security space and the disaster recovery space and the cloud space, kind of thinking about, okay, this could happen. What are our contingency plans? Do we have the right people in place to be able to assess this stuff? Maybe outsourcing our SOC team isn't a good idea right now because those type of people can be in place to help. So just thinking about that, and even if you have already outsourced your SOC team, maybe it's a good time to bring in somebody like MTMG to kind of look at things, assess things, and help you understand, hey, here's what could happen. Here's how you could potentially have a better disaster recovery plan or a better cybersecurity plan or a better cloud plan. So just looking at those things and assessing them, and you really do need to have a third party look at those things at least a couple of times a year just to make sure that, you're looking at everything, right? If you have a handful of people internally, they could be the smartest people in the world, but they may not think of things outside the box. So having a third party come in and help you, hey, let's look at this, let's look at that. And they give you some guidance and you can take that guidance to hand and, you may use it, you may not, but at least you've thought of other things so that if something does happen, okay, well, I was told this, I was told that, I did make this decision. Here's some ways that I could do things better in the future. So
Yeah, as a closing thought on that, thinking about these things holistically, you have the tools in place. That being said, you're still going to suffer the consequences of attacks. And the other side of this is looking at disaster recovery and business continuity. How resilient is your plan that you have in place? Because things can and will happen to you. Do you have not just a plan to prevent what you can prevent, but also when something does go sideways on you? What is your plan to have, offline copies of your data? What's your plan to have some kind of business continuity, other backup instances of your cloud applications? And or what happens if your office is a smoking crater? That still happens. And have your compute where, having your compute as a general philosophy, having your compute where your customers are going to be, where the compute has to happen. That's what we call edge computing. Think about that holistically and, what are you going to do with disaster recovery when something does go sideways on you? That's just think about it holistically beyond the throwing tools at something. Buying a bunch of pots and pans doesn't make you a good cook. You have to actually know what you're doing with it, but also think about what happens when something is going to go sideways on you. But that's my closing thought on that topic.
Excellent. Well, this was extremely informative. I think a really great session for people to listen to. So a lot of information, but we are at the point, gather kids around the radio here. We are at the point where we're doing our more than mere genius questions, our MTMG questions. And these are questions designed to find out a little bit more about you, Bob, and Tom. So it's in the spirit of Inside the Actor Studio, if you're familiar with those questions. But we're going to jump right in. So if you guys want to do a cadence, if Bob, you want to go first, Tom, you want to go second, that's fine. We can do that. But so first question is, outside of work, what is an activity that you're passionate about?
I'll jump in on that one. There's a lot of things I like, but I would say that one of the most exciting things to me, I have two young girls and they both enjoy skiing and bike riding. So I love going bike riding and skiing with my kids. I've gotten them into mountain biking so I can stay off the road. So I feel a little bit safer, but then you're dealing with rocks and roots, but hey, it's better than getting hit by a car. So I love being outside in the woods, hiking, mountain biking with my kids or on the slopes skiing, depending on the season.
And I'll add, I'm passionate about exploring, traveling, but also being physically active. I was an athlete in high school. I grew up in Massachusetts. I discovered snowboarding at the age of 24. And if you told me within 3 years I'd be running a ski house in New Hampshire, I would have laughed. And a startup company said, to be promoted, you have to be relocated. So they said New York or West Coast. I said, send me to the Bay Area, and spent 6 years snowboarding Tahoe. And then Oracle Corporation relocated me to Colorado and been snowboarding here ever since. And it's a great way to be physically active, especially in the winter, but also a great way to travel and see new places.
That's a great answer. Those really are great answers.
All right. Name one book or podcast that has inspired you.
I'll start again, and I'm gonna put a little plug in for a friend of mine. So a friend of mine from college, I used to do triathlons in college, and one of my friends that I used to do triathlons with became very passionate. I'm sure she always was, but she became more and more passionate about female activism, right? So she actually wrote a book called Stand. She's written a few books, but her last book, or second to last book, named Stand, is about activism and getting women's sports back in the forefront of things. And she inspires me a lot because I have young girls. And she was actually able to, her and a couple other people got together, and she's big into cycling, as you can imagine, from triathlons. And she got the Tour de France to reinvigorate the La Femme race, which is the female version of the Tour de France. So because of her and a couple other people, they now do the women's Tour de France again, which is awesome. And she was out there. She goes out there every year and is part of that. So she's a huge inspiration to me. I brought one of my daughters to go see her when she spoke at MIT recently, and she's a huge inspiration to me.
Wonderful.
And what was her name?
Catherine Bertine. And I love this part. I love this question because I do listen. I am a podcast addict, and some podcasts, the interviewers always ask their interviewees, especially if they're authors or what have you. I say, what are the 3 books you're reading right now? And so if you can see behind me, I don't know if this is going to come up in the audio podcast, but there are a stack of books behind me. And the one that's most related to what we work on is called Burn Book by Kara Swisher. And it's just a book length of her career doing interviews with Silicon Valley leaders. And she's a fascinating insight into the culture of technology around Silicon Valley. I spent 6 years there, so it's a fascinating thing for myself. She also has podcasts as well with Kara Swisher, and she collaborates with Scott Galloway, who is a great business thought leader. He doesn't get it right all the time, not nearly, but his ideas are fascinating. And then so I try to read 20 books a year. That's another passion of mine, constantly learning. Because if you're not moving ahead, you are falling behind. And so, yeah, I have that stack of books, try to go through 20 of them a year. And the last one I read was Start With No, which is I think James Cross is the author, and it's a great book about taking the negotiation process and from a 90-degree angle, from just starting with why we shouldn't do something instead of why we should.
Very interesting approach. So who was an important mentor for you at any time in your life?
I'll kind of add to that. I think, and this may be a little cheesy, but I'm going to go with this one. I think I have a very good sphere of influence, lots of good friends, lots of good family members. And I've always looked up to my parents. My mom and dad have always been my mentors, like just in life but my parents are both very compassionate. They are very active parts of the church. They both belong to the Lions Club, which is giving constantly. And they've been together for 1,000 years. So I think this year is their 45th anniversary or something like that. So yeah, so they're a huge mentor to me and just, a very big part of my life, obviously. So, and they do still live relatively close to me. So I get to visit them, and they were actually over the house a couple of days ago to have barbecue. So very important part of my life is my parents.
My parents wanted me to run a Ford dealership, so I can't count them as mentors. They had a very specific plan for me in my life. I have had some great benefactors and mentors, people that gave me a shot at something new, people that believed in me over the years. And that's been absolutely tremendous. The other mentors I have are actually, I'm going to call out a community. I run a meetup in my spare time, the Colorado Textile Professionals, and it has close to 1,600 members. And I've found that the more I give to this community, it's something that started on a lark, and it's turned into something wonderful. It's turned into a community of other technology professionals and I find the more I give, the more I get back. It has paid huge dividends over the last 9 years of my life.
Awesome.
I love that. Which talent that you do not have would you most like to?
I'll let Bob start with that.
I've always had a creative edge to my life, and it's something technology just made more financial sense for me to pursue. I got a business degree, but there were certain points in my life where I always wanted to, really explore my creative side. And that has manifested itself in different ways. And it can, and that's been, I'm fascinated by the arts, fascinated by festivals and music. And I always wish that was something I paid more attention to in my career. But what I do pays the bill.
Yeah, and I guess I'll add something similar to that. When I was younger, when I was very young, I always wanted to be an architect, and I went to college for architecture. And even shortly after that, I wanted to design cars. I was very into cars, so I wanted to design cars or be an architect. And I just never had I just wasn't as much of an artist as I wanted to be. So I kind of wish the same thing. So went to school for architecture and engineering, even worked at an engineering firm doing CAD design for a while, but I just wasn't as artistic as I wanted to be able to pursue my passion. So.
Interesting. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Paris, France. Mine has two parts. If I love where I am now, so I wouldn't want to. My kids love where we are now. But if situation was different, I've been to Australia and I loved it there. I would love to live there, but I wouldn't want to uproot my family. So.
Interesting. Australia is a new one that I hadn't heard before.
Yeah, it is.
I was Gold Coast, Australia. I went to for work, and it was probably one of the coolest places I've ever been.
I got to tell you, it's the lucky country. I lived there for a year during college, study abroad, 8 months of study, 4 months of backpacking. And I got to tell you, if I didn't have to come back for my senior year of college back in the mid-90s, I might not have come back. The weather's wonderful. The people are friendly. The beer is better. And it is truly the lucky country. I would love to go back there as well. But yeah, I was conversant in French for my 20s and teens and 20s. And something else I'd love to pursue is become fluent in a second language. And hence Paris, France, or the Riviera.
Interesting.
There you go.
What profession other than yours would you love to try?
I think that goes back into that creative side. I think I'm fairly prolific with my YouTube content. So being one of those content creators might be fun in whatever capacity it is. Being a writer for a late night comedy show or just doing something like that would be a lot of fun. Again, just let that creative edge out. Let it flourish.
Yeah, I actually dabbled a little bit in college in acting, and I would have loved to have been able to pursue it, but I went on a few casting calls and I ended up doing a couple little things, but never did anything big. So that would have been cool to continue that and be able to do that.
As far as continuing education, something I found when I was at Oracle, they had an in-house Toastmasters chapter, and that really helps out with communication skills. In graduate school for that is going to improv comedy. And here in Colorado, they have a couple of classes, but we can, that is something that you can still pursue, and it does really help flush out and really improve your communication skills, especially thinking fast on your feet.
Yeah, improv is tough. It's very tough, and that would be a great skill to have. Who is your favorite superhero?
Oh, I'd have to say Batman, because he doesn't actually have any superpowers. He's just a very smart guy that uses technology very effectively, and he's a force for good.
I would say Superman, kind of, he's using his power for good, and he has that human element. If you ever watch any of the movies, there's always a scene where you can tell he's half human or he's part human, and he's always using his humanity, and that makes him different than everyone else from his planet, right? So I think that's interesting, where you have a superhero who is leveraging their humanity to do the right thing and to try to protect humanity, I guess.
I love it. What is your favorite sound?
My kids when I get home from something. Even if they're yelling.
It will be named. Musically, I'm a metalhead, so I do love, one of my favorite bands is from California, the Deftones. And they're epic. They bring an operatic sound to their art metal specific style of music. And that's something that I find, it's not calming thing, but it's an energizing thing for me.
I'll add another thing, because I know mine was a little like along your lines. I'm a big car guy, so a really nice flat 6 or a well-tuned V8 is also very awesome to hear.
Don't tell my family, but I've always wanted to have a '68 Dodge Charger with a 7.2 liter 440 V8, and Yeah, they just saw me if I never knew it. The cool on it, believes I'd cord, but those vintage muscle cars make the most beautiful fruity noises, those beautiful fruity melodies ever.
That is true. Bob, I think you might have jumped into our next question already, but what is your favorite song when you are stressed or need a lift?
So my favorite music, I'd say pretty much anything out of the Deftones discography is something that is both resetting, energizing, calming at the same time for me. Other metal artists, and there can be some electronic dance music artists like Bass Nectar or Space Cowboys. These are Bay Area artists primarily. The Fear Factory, on my creative side of things, I have participated. I can't say I performed on stage at Red Rocks during here in Denver, Colorado, throwing myself into that music that just speaks to me and goes into your soul, not just chewing gum for the ear. Can name a few other artists you're interested in. Maybe that's something we could do. We'll post our discographies or have the MTMG playlist for each one of us. I think that would be a great idea.
Well, you're reading my wife's mind. You are reading my wife's mind. She's thinking the same thing. Tom, did you answer?
No, and I'll just keep it kind of generic. I love all kinds of music. I guess depending on the mood, sometimes some good 70s music or I don't know. It depends on what I need a lift from, but maybe, I don't know, some good Van Morrison or something like that sometimes is good to get you going.
Very nicely done.
I was hanging out with some of my neighbors. My building has a pool deck, and I was playing Thievery Corporation for them yesterday. Something a little more crowd friendly, ear friendly. And some of their they have a world sound, but they also have a reggae sound, depending on which of their 20 artists are participating. And that's something that I think I'll definitely add to the playlist. It's something that is again, reset the mind, take your mind off of things, and give yourself a reset.
I love it. And this is my favorite question to end on. What is the one thing you most want to be known for after you're gone?
I guess I'll start with this one. I just want to be known for leaving a mark. I helped somebody, right? Or I raised good kids, whatever that may be. My mark on the world would be like, hey, I helped it. And maybe it's, I helped a handful of companies increase their security posture, whatever it is. I want to be known for helping somebody, not just like building something or selling something. I want to know that I helped them, right? Maybe I sold them the security thing, but that helped them because XYZ. So just being known for helping and making the world a better place somehow.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, similar line of thought, I think all of us are here to help, and you don't get to take anything with you when you leave this world. So what you have are relationships. And I like to think that no one's going to remember how many things you had, how many awesome cars you owned or whatever. The people that loved you will remember you. And I'd like to be known that I had relationships with friends, with family, with business partners, and I was a force for good for all of them.
I
Agreed.
I think this is showing exactly why we wanted you on the team. You guys really understand what our ethos is. It's about helping, it's about giving back, it's about doing the right thing, and taking your industry expertise. So this has been a great conversation. I think you guys really showed a lot of skills, a lot of talent, and a lot of heart. And I can't thank you enough. And I'm really looking forward to what we're able to do together in the coming months. So thank you so much, guys, for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, guys.
So that brings us to the end of today's conversation. Thank you for joining us. If today's discussion resonated with you, please consider giving us a 5-star review. Your feedback not only supports our show, but also helps others find us. Thank you so much for listening to MTMG's IT Roundtable. We look forward to bringing you more conversations soon. Until then, take care, and know our team is always here to help. Slanchawa.
MTMG, guidance that empowers.